Good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Harpenau, and I'm the Executive Director of the World Affairs Council. I just want to welcome you briefly as we kick off the 15th Annual International Education Summit. And we are going to start this morning with actually a hello and good morning from Northern Kentucky University's President Vaja. And Northern Kentucky University is one of our strongest community partners in this global work. So James, if you want to go ahead and play the video.
Annual International Education Summit. My name is Dr. Ashish Vaidya, and I have the privilege to serve as the president of Northern Kentucky University, an institution committed to wide-ranging internationalization efforts on our campus and in the region. I'm proud of our now 15-year partnership with the World Affairs Council to promote the important work of the International Education Summit. I hope you're as excited as I am, because you're one of more than 600 high school students, college students, and educators from the region engaging in this important event where you will explore your future in the world. The International Education Summit is meant to raise your awareness about global issues and global careers so that you have the tools for engagement, dialogue, and mentorship to reflect on your future in the world. The global pandemic made it very clear that the world is both connected and vulnerable at the same time. And issues like climate change are impacting every country. With political upheaval in several parts of the world, millions of people are being displaced. Addressing and solving these problems will require a high degree of understanding and collaboration across the world, led by current and future leaders like you. Our global future and ability to address persistent challenges will mean that we need to build awareness and engage with people across the world. Now more than ever before, we need individuals who can thrive in today's global workplace. We need individuals who will navigate diverse cultures with grace and empathy, and who can work effectively with people whose perspectives are quite different from their own. That mission is at the heart of what NKU aims to do as well. NKU's internationalization strategy supports our mission to empower our graduates to have fulfilling careers and meaningful lives, while contributing to the economic, civic, and social vitality of the region and beyond. Whether it's expanding study abroad opportunities for our students, attracting students from around the world, welcoming new immigrants to our community, or supporting this region's global aspirations, we want to create a more globally aware and culturally competent talent force and region. Now, I know we have a full agenda ahead, so I will let you get to it. Thank you for your commitment to international education and for joining this important event. Best wishes and have a wonderful day.
So I'm very excited again to introduce you to Deborah Schultz, a valued friend and advisory member of the World Affairs Council. She's going to share a little bit more with you about our theme and, of course, introduce our wonderful panel today. Deborah Schultz is a change agent and president of Transborder Solutions, a global consulting firm specializing in the development of never done before new to market global projects in both private and nonprofit sectors. She's worked most recently in South Africa, Indonesia, and Turkey. She founded Midfest International in Middletown, Ohio, and she also is an advisor to the Sun Project since its inception. She's very involved in the community and international efforts, and she graduated from Miami University and also did her master's at the Elliott School at George Washington University and received an MPA from the Stein School of Public Administration at the University of Kansas. We are so thankful to have worked with her over these years, and I am, without further ado, going to pass it to her to kickstart our conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Michelle, for those kind words. It's a real pleasure to work with the council, which I've been involved with since high school. And it's also a pleasure to work with our new education director, Erica. So I want to welcome our panel today, where we're going to be discussing the ways that we can gain global competency, cultural fluency, in education, careers, through volunteerism in our communities, but also in the larger world. You're going to hear stories from these young professionals engaged in a wide variety of interesting careers and how they ended up there. I can trace an international life beginning in, believe it or not, 5th grade and 4th grade. In 5th grade, I was given private Spanish lessons in my elementary school, which at the time was pretty rare. And that really influenced my life greatly. But the thing that I also like to mention as an influence early on was when in the 4th grade, my elementary school principal brought a friend to my classroom who was this very imposing Turkish army general. He was very awe-inspiring to look at as a 4th grader in full army gear. He had a huge sword and a mustache. And I don't remember a thing the man said, but my curiosity about Turkey was piqued forever. So decades later, I find that I'm working with Turkey in a number of different ways, but doing business in Turkey. And I was also asked to speak to an auditorium full of high school students who were learning English. So it felt like a real full circle moment for me. And I told them the story about meeting this Turkish general in the 4th grade. And on that same trip, I finally put 2 and 2 together when someone mentioned that Turkey had a very fiercely brave and capable brigade that was attached to the US 25th Infantry Division during the Korean War. And this unit helped Turkey become closer both to the United States and Korea, and paved the way for their acceptance into NATO. So it's really interesting how you can trace the threads of certain happenstances in your life to things that evolve in your life. I can't be sure this is what was the story behind that, but it makes a lot of sense that that probably was it. I hope as you listen to the panel today, you'll think about catalysts which may inform your life pathways, international or not, in ways that you can't figure really out until life unfolds before you. You can't really figure out it until life unfolds. No doubt, as President Ashish said, COVID-19 and the climate change vividly reminds us that we're all we are all inextricably linked on this one planet we share. But how we connect to that larger world or the worlds within our own communities is different for all of us. It does matter, however, as our panel will demonstrate. So our decisions affect not just our lives, what we consume affects the world. And many of those decisions will continue to affect the wider world in which we all hope to continue to exist. I'll now ask our panel to introduce themselves, name, current job, education, and perhaps a significant international experience. Lindley, you'll start us off. I thank you for being with us. You're in Seattle, so your time zone is very different than ours, and you're up very early. And then we'll go to David, Thomas, and Megan. So Lindley, take it away.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Lindley Winchester. As Deborah mentioned, I'm in Seattle right now, so it's 6:14. It's very dark outside still. So I'm originally from Florence, Kentucky, but I now live in Seattle. I moved to Seattle to work at Amazon, where I'm currently a senior language engineer. So my job is I work on Amazon Alexa, specifically putting Alexa into automobiles. Before working at Amazon, I received my PhD in linguistics at Georgetown University in Washington, DC. And then before that, I got my master's and bachelor's from the University of Kentucky. My focus within linguistics during my studies was on Arabic dialects. So I've had the opportunity to travel around both the Middle East as well as the Mediterranean for different research and conference purposes. The original reason I ended up in linguistics and eventually getting my doctorate was actually due to my interest in traveling, which I'll probably talk about later in various questions. I grew up knowing I wanted to see the world, which ended up being kind of the main motivator to how I got to where I am today.
Thanks, Lindley. David?
Hi, good morning. My name is Dave Crookham. I grew up on the west side of Cincinnati. At a very young age, I knew that I wanted to go into the military. I felt that that calling to serve our country. At age 10, I think it was 4th grade, my cousin Scott came back from Desert Storm, and he was in his dress blue uniform. He was a Marine, and he spoke to my 4th grade class, and that was kind of the day I thought I wanted to be a Marine. So I kind of internalized that thought, but I didn't really tell a whole lot of people, but I made that my goal. I went to Miami University. I was in the ROTC program. In 2003, I graduated and was commissioned a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps. From there, I went to flight school. I had a 10-year career as a Marine Corps helicopter pilot. My international exposure during that time was 2 deployments aboard a Navy ship in the Gulf of Aden, the Horn of Africa region. And then I did a tour, a search and rescue tour in North Carolina. About 2015, I separated from active duty. I joined the reserves. I've been in the reserves for about 6 years now. I'm in a really cool job it's a really unique position as my reserve job. I'm the Marine for Life representative for Cincinnati, and I help transitioning service members and veterans in the area find jobs and just plug those individuals into the local resources that exist. For my day job, I work in sheet metal manufacturing. I sell automation equipment, primarily in cutting and bending sheet metal. So that's me in a nutshell. Personal note, married with 2 kids, a 12-year-old boy and a 9-year-old daughter, and been married for 15 years.
Thanks, David. I guess you'd like to go by Dave.
Either
Thomas?
one's good.
Okay, Thomas?
Morning, everyone. My name's Thomas Schultz. I am a Cincinnati native, born and raised, and I went to undergraduate at Denison University, where I studied East Asian studies with Chinese language and environmental science. So I was pleased to see that that was a topic of interest, both as a subject matter and a region. I'd be happy to share my experiences working at the intersection of those 2 disciplines later in the program. After college, I joined the United States Peace Corps, a volunteer program started in the 1960s. I served in Paraguay from 2011 to 2013 as an environmental education and conservation volunteer, focusing on programs that included everything from tree planting, environmental education in schools, library constructions, things like that. After the Peace Corps, I moved to Washington, D.C., where I took a job working for the United States Environmental Protection Agency's Energy Star program, Department of Energy's Better Buildings Challenge program, and then later I had an opportunity to work for the United States Agency for International Development, doing some projects related to energy efficiency in El Salvador and Mexico. After 3 years of consulting, I decided to go back to graduate school, and I went to earn a Master's of Public Affairs at Indiana University in Bloomington, where I continue to focus on sustainability. During grad school, I had the opportunity to go down to do a fellowship with the Brazilian government and spend some time in Guatemala doing a social enterprise related program. After all that international experience, home was calling to me, so I took an opportunity to come back and work for the city of Cincinnati, who had just launched a comprehensive sustainability plan in 2018. I felt like that was an opportunity, since climate change is a global challenge, to bring what I've learned globally and apply some of those skill sets and disciplines to addressing climate change at the local level. So I currently work for an organization that serves 10 counties in the greater Cincinnati area called Green Umbrella. We're a sustainability alliance, and I specifically work on improving the sustainability and performance of commercial buildings across the region. Really a pleasure to be with you and look forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Tom. Megan?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Really happy to be with you and have the opportunity to share some of my experiences. Grew up in Cincinnati and Montgomery. Always have had a love of travel and just like getting out outside of my community. Grew up in a family where that was always stressed and an important value that was instilled in me. So I chose to go to Auburn University for undergrad. It's pretty far away from home, but it was a challenge I knew I wanted to, undertake. So post Auburn, I unsure of what I wanted to do for a career path. I decided I would just spend a year volunteering overseas. So I went to Tanzania, followed by Brazil, working with children in orphanages and daycare centers. And sort of while I was, involved in those 2 volunteer opportunities, I was kind of, started to think about humanitarian aid and nonprofit work as a career path. Had never quite considered that, but it sort of, came to the realization that that was the direction I wanted to go in. So I enrolled in a master's program in 2004 in international service. The program was based in London, but had a service learning component. So I spent the first semester in Kingston, Jamaica at the University of Technology, and worked with at-risk teenage girls while I was there. So completed that program, the master's program, and wasn't sure, again, sort of what the path I was going to take would be, but I knew I wanted to be in DC and be in a global city with good job opportunities in humanitarian field. So moved to DC without a job, and I'm still here. And in the last, I'd say, 15 years that I've been here, I've had 4 very different jobs in different sectors. I've worked in the nonprofit sector, education, and now I'm in the corporate sector. And while all positions have been very different and have utilized different skill sets, they've all probably definitely benefited from my worldview and my ability to see a variety of perspectives and appreciate people with diverse backgrounds. So currently I am the communications director at the Chertoff Group, which is a global security consulting firm. So we primarily help companies and governments throughout the world with cybersecurity, physical security, and assessing geopolitical risk. So the organization's motto is enabling a more secure world. This is definitely an industry and a field I never thought that I would find myself in, but it's exciting and I'm learning something new every day. And I think that's what sort of gets me up every morning and excited to go to work and do my job. So yeah, happy to be with you all and looking forward to answering your questions and sharing more about my career path.
Thanks, Megan. I have a question that anybody can answer, but I'll start maybe with Lindley and Thomas if you want to try this one. And if the other two, if Megan and Dave, you want to try too. Tell us about, do you have an aha moment in your life that sort of surprised you, that led you in a direction that you didn't expect in your career or your volunteer work? I mean, I think you do have, because you talked to me, Lindley, about you thought you were on one career path and then you ended up switching. You've alluded to it a little bit. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I guess I'm trying to think of, there's 2 different examples where I have changed career paths, I guess. I'm trying to think of which one you mentioned.
Either one is fine, or both.
Yeah. So, so I guess I'll go with the first big change. So as I mentioned in my intro, a lot of my motivation to kind of where I've gotten to today is that I'm really interested in traveling. I call it a hobby, but it probably has much more standing than just that at this point. But that was kind of the only really thing I knew about myself going into college. And so like when you're trying to pick a major going into college, it's really hard. You have no idea. Like a lot of these topics you've never really heard of, never really thought about too deeply. So I went with traveling and I was like, okay, well, travel journalists travel, obviously. So I'll do that. So my first year of college, I quickly found out that like travel writing and things like that weren't really my thing. Like journalism itself wasn't really going to work out. But during that time I was taking language courses because that's a general requirement in college. And so I was like, oh, but I really like languages. And so at the time my thought was, okay, well, I mean, languages are kind of inherently international. We all like languages are spoken. There's all different languages that are spoken across the world. So I switched paths to linguistics, which is the study of languages. And at the time I didn't really think, I guess, too deeply on how much that would kind of achieve my goals of traveling. But so I guess this isn't really an aha moment, but kind of a series of aha moments where I made that transition. And then throughout time, I ended up going to study abroad in Egypt when I was an undergrad, because I studied Arabic when I was an undergrad at UK. And then when I was there, I was like, wow, I really love this. I'm going to try and come back when I finish. So that I'm going to get a job here and I'll just set up my life in Egypt. Then the Arab Spring happened and things kind of became more difficult to do that. So then I kind of had to rearrange my thoughts and go to graduate school instead. And then graduate school kind of ended up working out really well for traveling purposes, because I was able to use different research opportunities, different conference presentations, different just like general studies stuff to get me to various places throughout the world that way. So while in graduate school, I was able to travel to the UK, to Malta, which is an island in the Mediterranean, just south of Sicily, north of Tunisia, and Germany as well, and hop around all those different countries and see what I wanted to see, study what I wanted to study. So yeah, I guess not really an aha moment, but that was, travel kind of guided me throughout these things, and it ended up well. And now I'm here, I'm at Amazon, where not necessarily doing research and things like that on different languages anymore, but Alexa itself is an international product. Cars themselves are an international product. So I engage with people all around the world day to day for different Alexa reasons.
Thomas, do you have an aha moment that you can remember that really sort of helped gel things for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure that I have an aha moment, but I have an explanation as to why that maybe didn't happen for me. I grew up in Cincinnati. My father was not from the United States. He was from Argentina. And my mother is the host of this panel. So you can see that there was an international influence from a very early age in our household. Our perspective was that the world was a very big place and that there was a lot of different cultures, countries, peoples, languages. And that was sort of a revolving theme of my childhood. We were hosted many international guests in our home as I grew up. I remember a man from Thailand, woman from Argentina, just off the top of my head. And it became sort of evident that, you know, the world is a big place, and you know that the world is increasingly connected through technology, and access to places the world was becoming increasingly smaller, particularly as I was growing up. So I'd say that I was never really concerned or fearful of seeing other places and going other places, taking chances to expand my horizons globally. And I think that that served me well in terms of overall willingness to be able to pursue things that might be perceived to be challenging. Like in college, I studied Chinese. I studied abroad in China and Beijing in 2009 for 4 months. And I don't know if I hadn't had that type of upbringing or perspective that I would actually have had the courage to pursue that as a discipline within my higher education studies. And so I'd say that I had a series of small moments that sort of culminated in a more global perspective that continues to inform my career to this day.
Thanks. David, what about you? You had an aha moment in the 4th grade like I did.
I did. That was kind of my aha moment that propelled me to want to serve in the military. But I did have somewhat of an aha moment. I maybe didn't know it at the time. During from an international perspective, during my first deployment, like I mentioned, we deployed in the Gulf of Aden. We were aboard this big ship called the USS Boxer, and then some of us separated and went on this little smaller ship called the USS New Orleans, and we went and did our own thing. And we were in this island country called the Maldives. It's in the Indian Ocean. It's southwest of India and Singapore. A very interesting country. It's just made up of hundreds of islands. If you ever seen like a cartoon where there's like a little sandbar with one palm tree and a person on it, and there's places like that actually exist out in the ocean. But anyway, kind of an unexpected event happened where late in the night, I think it was almost around midnight, and we got a call that there was a Maldivian citizen who was in a motorcycle accident. And whatever island he was on, he couldn't get the care he needed he had major head trauma. So we were in the area, and they called on us as friends and said, can you help us out? And we went and flew this gentleman about an 1.5-hour flight in somewhat challenging conditions. It was very cloudy that night. And we were able to fly him to the hospital and get him the care he needed. And it felt very rewarding being a part of a mission like that. And I think subconsciously that drove me to want to do search and rescue later on in my career. So after that deployment, I started thinking 2-3 years out what I was going to do after my next deployment. So I made it my goal to go to the search and rescue squadron in North Carolina. And I knew it was going to be tough to get into because it was a small squadron and they usually only had 1 or 2 slots open every year. But I thought positively about it, and this is something I learned when I was in flight school, is the power of visualization. I visualized that I was going to be at that squadron, and I thought positively about it, but I also took action on it. I worked my connections. I made it known that that's where I wanted to go. And after my deployment in 2011, my follow-on orders were thankfully as a search and rescue pilot in North Carolina. And that was the best 4 years of my career. My leadership roles there were I really developed as a leader. I had 3 different leadership roles there. The flying was unbelievable, being a part of life-saving missions, getting to see the unbelievable attributes of the Marines and some of the amazing things they do to save lives in the face of adversity was really rewarding. And we also got to do a lot of fun flying too, up and down the beach, waving to people, which was also pretty enjoyable as well. But I think it just goes to show you, you never know what experience is going to lead to something down the road. So whatever it is you're doing at the time, do it with a purpose and know that it could lead to something bigger down the road.
Megan, thank you, Dave. Megan, on this question, but maybe a little twist, I want everybody to start thinking, this program is for high school students particularly. What advice, based upon your career or your career trajectory, would you offer to high school students?
Great question. And it's probably a question, oh gosh, I've been out of high school for over 20 years now, hard to believe. And it's still a question you ask yourself, what do you want to do with your, career in your life? So I think, one important thing was probably never stop asking yourself that question and never get too comfortable with what you're doing, but also do what you love to do. I'm sure as students you're getting advice from all sorts of places about what you should do and what path you should be on and what the job market wants and what are marketable skills. And while that's all valid and worth considering, I think the most important thing is what do you love doing and what is a subject matter that you're interested in studying. In my undergrad, I got a degree in psychology and really gave it very little thought of what career path would this take me on. It was more just something I wanted to invest 4 years studying. So I think that would be my biggest piece of advice is you're sort of determining what path to go on. Really spend time thinking about, well, what do I enjoy reading about, studying, discussing, and that will sort of put you on a good path, and then do your best to sort of tune out there's probably lots of well-meaning people in your life, but really you know better than anyone what you'll enjoy, and that will, I promise you, that will take you on a path that will be more fulfilling than just following what you think you should do as opposed to what you want to do.
What do you think, Thomas? What a piece of advice would you give high school students?
I'll just say flat out, the pandemic has sort of changed the perception of the world, I think, for a lot of people. And when I was in high school 15 years ago, the world was more accessible than ever. And it was very much encouraged to not be afraid of that and pursue that. And I think that there is some change in perceptions, and especially as the pandemic has, quite literally restricted people from moving. I think it would be important advice to think about whether or not it's the time to become more insular, or if it's which would be the natural compulsion, I think, to be more afraid of the unknown, but to kind of maybe resist those tendencies and recognize that we're all the same species, and that everybody on Earth is impacted by things like climate change, the pandemic, and whatnot, and try to resist the the urge to look inward when looking outward is really going to continue to be something that is going to be important for the rest of our lives, and our connections will continue to grow in some ways. So I guess in terms of some practical advice, it is, there are always opportunities should you decide to pursue higher education or join the military, and to be exposed to different cultures. There, even in your professional life, you may at some point, if you don't decide to go to college, that your job might put you in a position where you need to go outside of the United States. And I think that the advice I would say is, rather than try to resist that or be fearful of it, to try to embrace it and be okay with being uncomfortable in a circumstance that's outside of your own experience. And for my part, I always have found that no matter where I am on earth, people do like to laugh, even if the cultural context is completely different. There's sort of a common humanity and our emotions and behaviors that I think you can find something to relate to anybody about if you're willing to let yourself be vulnerable in those circumstances.
Lindley, what would you say in terms of advice to students? I mean, there's always this argument. Do you go and do what you love, even if it doesn't make you enough money? Or do you do what you love for a while and then switch to a career that makes more money and then switch back? I mean, what's your advice?
I guess my advice would be kind of piggybacking on something that Megan said. A lot of times when you were leaving high school, people, I feel like the common question is well, what do you want to do when you're trying to decide what the next step is of your life? What do you want to be when you grow up, kind of? And I think that when people say that, they kind of think of it as there's a moment in your life where all of a sudden you will be this person that you want to be when you grow up. And I don't really think it works that way. That implies that there's only essentially one path between who you are now and that idealistic plan for the future, which in reality it's not really like that. There's many different paths that can take you to that one, what you want to be when you grow up. And so I guess my main advice would be just, instead of always looking forward to that one point in time in the future where you're going to be this expected person, enjoy the trip more. Different opportunities will pop up along the way that may interest you, and even though they might kind of seem like they're diverting you from whatever this linear path is from who you are to who you want to be when you grow up, I would recommend taking advantage of them. In my experience, I've done a lot of different random things that don't really relate to what I do right now, but I think that ultimately they were still good experiences that have played a role in how my life has kind of developed up into this point. So yeah, just enjoy the opportunities as they come along.
I'm sure you have, thank you. I'm sure you have some good advice for us, Dave.
Yeah, I would say, so there's a little bit of a problem going on in our world, or in our country, is that there are more jobs available than there are people to fill them, or people that want to work in those jobs. There are a ton of opportunities out there. So what I would tell individuals is to seek out those opportunities. I know your guidance counselors talk about employment, direct employment, enlistment, which is the military, or you can go the officer route, or education. And any of those paths are good paths. So whatever you choose, do it with purpose, and just know it's okay not to know exactly what you want to do in life. You're young and you're learning. And so if you go the education route and it's not working for you, it's not the end of the world. There are so many jobs out there. There's what we call the skills gap going on in our country. There's jobs like we need welders, we need technical positions. There's a lot of good jobs out there. You don't have to go the traditional 4-year college route. You could go to a technical school or a trade school, and not just technical jobs. You could become a phlebotomist. You could become a medical tech assistant. There's lots of good jobs out there. And just know, whatever you do, if you do it with purpose and you do it with drive and determination, if you work hard and you earn a paycheck, you are contributing to society. So my biggest piece of advice would be just to do something, even if you don't know what it is right away. You'll figure it out. But if you go put a full day's work in every day with drive and determination, and you are contributing to society, and you will figure out what you want to do for the rest of your life. As far as a military, and again, I said, so if it's not working out for you, you can try something different. There's always time. The military is a little bit more difficult to do that. You can't just try it out and say, hey, I don't like it. But I'll tell you this, 4 years goes by like nothing. 4 years is a blip in the radar. And after 4 years, at a minimum, you're going to have some really good experience as long as you put your heart into it. So that would be, I guess, my one piece of advice I would share.
So that's your advice, all of you, really good. We heard what's important to these high school students in this survey, or what they're worried about or concerned about. What are you concerned about, and what do you think is important? You can be local or global or whatever you want to say. What are you thinking about? Megan?
Sure, I'll be happy to answer that one. I think, I guess, and especially looking back on the past 18 months of the pandemic, and also, the work that I'm doing now in communications, I think the thing that concerns me the most probably is the amount of misinformation that's out there in the world right now. I think we all encourage debate and, different perspectives, but there's also the truth. And I think, I would encourage anyone, just to be a seeker of the truth, and to be a, critical consumer of everything that's out there that you're either reading or watching or seeing or hearing. Because I think that probably is, a big threat to the future, of our nation and and our world, is just this spread of misinformation. So yeah, I would just, have a critical eye and a critical ear, and don't be afraid, engage in debate with people, absolutely, but also, seek the truth in what you're, reading and doing and hearing. I think that will go a long way in, preparing you to be a global citizen. Absolutely.
Well, Thomas, I think I know what some of your concerns are, but what's important to you in the work that you're doing? And
Sure. Climate change is a global problem, and it's complex, and it's the contributions to it are, there's many different factors that contribute to growing emissions, greenhouse gas. Our economy is being tied to certain industries that have an impact on our viability as a planet to continue to sustain life. So for me, the the climate negotiations that will be taking place shortly are front of mind. This is a time for countries to make collective commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emissions globally. And the work of the different countries in this realm certainly have an impact on the viability of the United States to continue to address issues that are caused by climate change, most notably natural disasters like hurricanes, fires, but in the Midwest, things like flooding, increased rainfall, which have a myriad of different consequences for how we continue to be able to support ourselves in this country. So certainly, I can say that is the difficulty, sort of the cultural competencies of different nations to be able to understand where they're coming from, the agendas of other nations on how they view the role of climate change, and certainly the dynamics of power shifting across the globe all have an impact on whether or not we can come to sort of resolution as a species on whether or not we can actually reduce emissions meaningfully in a way that also sustains the economy and gives people an opportunity to live and grow, and become more stable in their lives. So those sorts of issues are obviously very front of mind in my day-to-day work as I work to kind of advance in some small way, contribute in some small way to reducing climate related effects in Cincinnati.
There's a question from one of our students that says, if a student wants an international career, what is the best way to prepare for that? Anybody? Lindley?
Let's see. I guess without being able to narrow down the scope to like what kind of international career you're interested in, I think that the best way to prepare for that would be to try not to say the really obvious answer here for me, which would be like learn a language. But so outside of that really obvious answer, though I do think that that would help, that kind of helps, like gives you an opening into a different area of the world and you know the language on a deeper level than like a typical traveler would. But I think also just kind of keeping an eye on different international opportunities that arise around you. You don't all of a sudden just become someone like international person. Like it's just kind of, it's something that kind of develops over time where you think about things from a global perspective. You take advantage of different opportunities that take you to different global areas. You speak to people about global issues. And so I think that all of those things would kind of, will definitely help prepare you for a industry in some sort of international field, because essentially it's all just experience that would culminate into a position that you'd want to have.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things I think of often is that if you want, there are so many opportunities in your own community. I mean, if you're not, my childhood, we didn't travel. I didn't travel out of the country until I was in my 20s. But, you know, there were opportunities in your communities to help with refugees, to work with the World Affairs Council, to, you know, when travel becomes more available again, to go on trips with your high schools or church groups or choirs maybe, or whatever. There are just lots of opportunities within your own community. So when I talk about, my advice to students is, you know, develop this sense of curiosity about the world, about the people in your, maybe your neighbors or from a different country. You know, get to know your neighbors and ask them about their country and their life here and their life there. You know, there are lots of international organizations in each, even in smallest of towns, there are some international organizations that, you know, deal with just immigrants. But I mean, there's always opportunities to volunteer, to expand within your own community, even if you're not just traveling or even if you're not pursuing an international language. But you have to put yourself out there, as David said. You know, you've got to make yourself available and you've got to be curious. I think being curious is probably one of the best things that anybody can do if they want an international career. Curious and in a way fearless to get what you two were saying, David and Thomas. You have to overcome some fears sometimes about traveling or being overseas, or, you know, COVID notwithstanding, which there are reasonable doubts about travel right now. But I mean, you have to put yourself out there. And there are worlds, there is the world, and then there are worlds within our own communities. And that's my advice. The other piece of advice that I have is I think double majors or minors and majors. So if you're majoring in international affairs, you know, maybe you minor in economics or business or technology, or you do a double major if you can manage that. Because I think that I've counseled a lot of people who only had international degrees, and that is, I think, somewhat of a narrower path than if you have international degrees and double majors. David, do you have anything else to add to that?
I would say a lot of it's already been touched upon, but like Lindley was saying, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. I think for me, when in my international exposure, I had to develop a comfortability with other going to other parts of the world and cultures, and develop an appreciation and really a sense of humbleness. You know, I think at first you kind of go into another country and you think, oh, I'm from the US. We're the biggest, we're the baddest. In reality, we're all equals. We're all created equals in this big giant giant world. So start developing that sense of appreciation and respect for other cultures. And you can do that, like Deborah said, by seeking out folks that are from other countries and learning about their experiences and developing a friendship and a relationship with those individuals. And also taking advantage, if you can take advantage of international travel, I would suggest that as well.
This is an interesting question. Someone says, what books and podcasts do you recommend?
Sure, I can answer that one. Happy to. Oh, sorry, David, were you going to answer? But
No, you, Megan. It's your,
okay, sure. So something I have recently really started to enjoy, it's from the New York Times, and I mean, people have probably heard of it, The Daily, is just a quick snapshot of whatever the big the headline is of the day, whether it's COVID-19 or, the Facebook whistleblower, or just sort of it breaks down whatever is the global headline of the day in about a 20-minute segment. So it really just it's a quick way to digest what's happening. And yeah, I think, and they always bring on interesting, experts and subject matter expertise. So I highly recommend spend 20 minutes a day with The Daily.
Anybody else?
Deborah, 3 books that I would strongly recommend. Simon Sinek's Start With Why, The Power of Positive Thinking, and The Magic of Thinking Big. And Thomas kind of touched upon this. A lot of the times, the reasons we don't achieve what we are supposed to achieve in life is because we don't put ourselves into uncomfortable situations. We don't get out of our comfort zone. I wrote this quote down in case I had a chance to use this, because this is sage wisdom, and it came from a 9-year-old. It came from my pastor's daughter. And she said, I think that if you stay in your comfort zone too long, you may not be able to experience new things. Actually, if you stay in your comfort zone, you won't be able to do the things that you were meant to do. And so how true is that? How many times do we not take that next step because of fear of failure, of rejection? Failure, rejection, adversity are all part of life. And if you don't experience those, you're not going to reap the true rewards and happiness that the life has to offer. So dig into those 3 books. I wish I had done that a long time ago, earlier on in my life. And also I would download the YouVersion Bible app and feed your soul each day with the verse of the day. I wish I had done that a long time ago. And I wish I had developed a relationship with God early on in my life.
Anybody else? Thomas, you're a podcast guy.
Sure. Yeah, well, I will say that any sort of book that, or podcast, magazine, newspaper, whatever website is going to have a particular tilt towards a particular perception of the world. So when you're sort of consuming information, I think it's, especially in this day and age, to do your best to try to take the information for what it is and maybe understand that it's not always objective. That being said, I've always, I've for a long time, if I'm just straight up trying to figure out what's happening in the world on a week-to-week basis, it's tough to beat the Economist, and they have a digital version as well as audio transcriptions of their articles, and everything from what's happening politically to Nigeria to what economic policy is occurring right now in China that's changing, the price of your smartphone. It's very comprehensive and gives a great snapshot into what the conversations are happening globally. I'd also sort of say, you'd be hard pressed, to not listen to, I would also say that The Daily is a great sort of daily podcast and dives into a lot of global issues. But NPR as well, your local NPR station will oftentimes do programming and focus on things globally. But NPR has a partnership with the British broadcasting company BBC. If you're looking for very straight up objective news in an audio format, it's tough to, the BBC is very global in its voice. And it does touch on far-reaching corners of the world that you might not necessarily be aware of what's going on there. So I'd sort of say The Economist, does magazines great. The BBC is sort of an audio website, newspaper type outlet. It was great for trying to expand your current events horizons.
So we have one more question, and then maybe just one very quickly, very briefly. Does anybody want to take this one on? What local organizations are doing good work that we should look into? I mean, I would say, maybe I'll take this question. We have chambers of commerce, foreign chambers of commerce. They're doing good work. The Rotary, I'm in the Rotary Club of Cincinnati. We have 3 international projects, all in Africa. We're looking for a 4th. You know, we're doing good work. Michelle mentioned the Sun Project. This is a project that puts solar in schools and clinics in Uganda. I'm intimately involved with that. But there are just, if you go to our website, we also have lists of international organizations, international restaurants. We have a big list on our Global Cincinnati website. So I would suggest you do that. And one of the sources of information that I found good is something called the Daily Chatter. And it's just this little very brief compendium of things that are happening in the world you may not have heard of that comes to my website, it comes to my internet, my email every once a week. And it really is very insightful, and it just keeps me up on events in a very quick and brief way. So let's just end real quickly with any last words, very short, because we've only got a minute or so.
Sure, I'll just add one thing, Deborah.
Yeah.
To that previous question about resources and if you're looking to get involved, a website I really find very useful. It's Volunteer Match.
Oh, wonderful.
So you put in the criteria of what you're interested in and what your skills are, and you will, on a weekly basis, get a list of opportunities. No obligation, but sometimes, you know, something interesting will pop up. You know, during COVID, I would pick up meals for public school children when they couldn't get their free lunch, or deliver groceries. So it's just an easy way to feel like, you know, when you have the time, there's small little opportunities and things you can do, you know, without making a huge commitment if you find yourself with, you know, a few extra hours here and there. So highly recommend that.
That was really helpful. Lindley, brief last word, very brief. Anything you haven't said that you really want to say?
I guess what I want to say is, I guess maybe tacking on to advice. You're already doing a great job by attending these different things. If you're wanting to have this global or international perspective, so just kind of like keep up that interest, that curiosity, and it'll only serve you well.
Thank you. Dave?
I kind of already said it, but go out there and you're
uncomfortable.
Be uncomfortable. Your role in the world is important. Do everything with purpose. Work hard in everything you do, no matter what it is, and be examples. Encourage others to do the same, and be examples to others to work hard. Eliminate the word laziness from your vocabulary.
Good idea.
Things.
Thomas, any last words? I think we're at our time.
Nope, I will defer to what Dave said. Thank everybody for participating.
Yeah, thank you all for participating. Michelle, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. Thank you to our panel. I think there were a lot of good insights, little tidbits we can take away from today. I also want to thank our moderator, Deborah Schultz, for moderating today's conversation.